एकम् अक्षरम् हृदि निरन्तरम् भासते स्वयम् लिख्यते कथम् हृदय कुहर मध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहम् इति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वम् चिन्वता मज्जता पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम् देहं मृण्मयवत् जडात्मकम् अहं बुद्धिर्न तस्यास्त्यतो नाहं तत्तत भावशुक्तिसमये सिद्धात्मसद्भावतः कोऽहं भावयुतः कुतो वरधिया दृष्टात्मनिष्टात्मना सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयम् सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयम् Namo Ramana. In this, the Thursday satsang from Ramana Maharshi Center for Learning, it has been our practice to read two verses selected for us from Guru Vachika Kovai. Each verse reading will be followed by a short meditation on its meaning, and that shall be followed by the practice of self-enquiry for about 10 minutes. After these two segments of reading the verses from Guru Vachika Kovai, the work by Muruganar Swamigal, the short meditation on its meaning, and the practice of Atma Vicharam, after these two segments are completed, today there will be summing up remarks by Shri Venkatesh Deshpande ji, and that shall be followed by the chanting of Sri Ramanashtotram by Vaibhav ji and Prarthana, which we shall accompany by self-enquiry, by enquiring who is listening, who is the listener to that source of Shabda which is arising from within us, who is the listener. That will be our offering to Bhagavan. We begin this evening's satsang by taking this first verse selected for us. Verse number 378. Verse 378. We find it in the segment Investigation into Truth. The other two segments following this are Meditation on the Truth and the Anubhava or experience of the truth. We find this verse in the 67th subsegment. The subheading is Desirelessness. Desirelessness, verse 378, Investigation into Truth. The verse goes like this. Only in those who have completely severed, only in those who have completely severed the bond of desire and attachment will the illusory appearance that associates with them through ego defilement perish. Only in those who have completely severed the bond of desire and attachment will the illusory appearance that associates with them through the ego defilement perish. The aim then is to cut off, without so much as a second thought, even the desire for the indescribable supreme bliss of peace that is full of jnana. The aim then is to cut off, without so much as a second thought, even the desire for the indescribable supreme bliss of peace that is full of jnana. Let's read the two sentences together. Only in those who have completely severed the bond of desire and attachment will the illusory appearance that associates with them through ego defilement perish. The aim then is to cut off, without so much as a second thought, even the desire for the indescribable supreme bliss of peace that is full of jnana. Bhagavan says in Akshar Manamale, Moham tavirthu un mohamai vaitum en moham tirayan Arunachala. O Arunachala, help me in getting rid of all the desires and attachments. Help me in getting rid of all the desires and attachments by having desire for liberation or by having desire for your holy feet. Then let that desire also be taken away, be removed from me, whatever that means. So those are the two aspects covered by this verse. That the journey in spirituality, the bond that the I thought has with mind thought. The mind is multiple, many. There are objects, there are people. For convenience, we say that we have passion, attachment with people, and we have desire for objects. But then we have attachment with objects which are accumulated. We have desire for objects not yet in possession, then attachment to objects in our possession, and attachment and desire for people That is what we find in the Mamakara. Urvaruham iva bandhanat, says the Mrityunjaya Japa, that as the creeper, which is the cucumber, when it becomes ripe. Last time, when in our satsang here, somebody had chanted the Rudram. After chanting the Rudram, he explained the meaning of the Urvarukam Iva Bandhana as described by a great teacher, Mahapiriva. So he was saying the speciality about that cucumber is that some of the creepers need the support of the structures. Some structures with wood or concrete have to be made. Then they will creep up, and from there the fruits will hang down and will drop up. But for cucumber, it appears the big one, it is already creeping. The creeper is going in the ground only. It is already in the ground. Both the fruit and the vine, they are in the ground. And when ripe, the fruit detaches itself so lightly, so gently, that there is no hurt for the cucumber nor for the vine. That means the sannyasi may start with an aversion, that all these relationships, all these attachments, all these desires are preventing me from meditating on the Lord's feet, and he will develop a big aversion. But then that aversion also will go away while meditating on the Lord's feet. That is how the path is there, that the detachment has to be in a particular way. It has to be gentle. If the detachment is with lot of harshness, hard, then there is still some work to be done. So let the mamakara, the bonds, let them be let go with the light of knowledge. Professor K. Swaminathan says that his own teacher in Brahma Sutras, after teaching him, he had come to Bengaluru. He was stationed in Chennai as a principal of a college. He had come to Bengaluru, and a person who is Pandit in Brahma Sutras taught him that. And after completing the teachings, he said, "Do you know that the epitome of Brahma Sutras lives nearby? That the very representation of Brahma Sutras is living in the form of Ramana in Tiruvannamalai, just 200 kilometers away." And Professor Swaminathan decides, he had been dilly-dallying to go to Tiruvannamalai for many years. Once his professor says and two other incidents happen in his life, he decides to go. But the teacher says that going to Bhagavan is like looking into the abyss from Doddapetta. And you better tie yourself with some bonds so that you can look into that abyss without fear. And the professor says, I took my wife, I took my old student, and I took my new student. Usually the teachers have some bond with students, so that I am firmly anchored. But then he says, later I realized that that was not necessary. In fact, the Bhagavan's teachings, it changes the same relationship from bond into light. The same relationship is seen that they are also seeking the real happiness. They are not seeking something from me. They are seeking something that they already have, and I don't have to give it to them. That all that has to be done is for them to let go of the bonds, and there they are. That is the truth. Rises and shines. As I professor says, I realized that Bhagavan's teachings and the practice of his teachings changes the same bonds into relationships of light, where the journey towards that light of consciousness is the only purpose of life is realized, and that every jiva is already having that light within them. So this is the best way to let go of bondage, to see that that is not made of ignorance. The relationship is not made out of ignorance. The relationship is permeated, is full, is completely covered, enveloped, and overlapped by jnana. That everything is jnana. And when this relationship surface from that, the only purpose is to remind each other of this jnana, that everyone is the jnana swarupa. There is not a little bit of darkness in reality. For that, do we have to have the moham for liberation? Absolutely not. So the second line, that once we realize that everything is full of light, then as Bhagavan says, when one realizes that there is no birth, then where is the question of the thought of liberation? When there is no bondage, where is the question of the moham for liberation? So Bhagavan always says, see if you are born now. If you are born now only, then only the attachments and desires arise. Then you will have to worry about how to liberate. If that birth itself is annulled by annihilating the ego that rises and right at the source, there everything is full of light. There is not even the moham for liberation. The desire for the bliss of liberation is also gone, because what is only that freedom where there is no birth, there is no death, there is no time or place conditionings, there is only the being which is full of light. And that is the practice that we are going to do for the next 10 minutes. Whenever the ego rises and wants to bind itself with some thought or relate itself with some thought, one has to diligently turn that attention back onto that ego by asking, for whom is this thought? The answer will come, this thought is for me. Once again, the light is put on that bundle of conditionings called the ego. The ego is nothing but a bundle of body parts conditionings and thought conditionings. Body is also essentially thought. And when that ego is dismantled, one realizes that birth itself is an illusion. Till such time, till one's nature is realized as the very source of everything, one should practice. And when the thought arises, enticing us to go into the area of bondage and be stuck there, one should diligently withdraw that attention and fix it on the self by inquiring, for whom is this thought? Who am I? With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in prayer 10 minutes. Ujjwal ji, you will be able to help us out?
I'll help you.
Okay.
Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. We go on to the second verse reading. The verse selected for us is 717. 717. We find it in the segment Meditation on the Truth. The subdivision is the divine name. The subdivision is the divine name. 717. The literal meaning of the word I is the ego that limits itself to the body. The literal meaning of the word I is the ego that limits itself to the body. Because the ego appears and disappears, when you examine it, you will know that the self, the abiding substratum of the ego, is the definitive import of that word I. The literal meaning of the word I is the ego that limits itself to the body. Because the ego appears and disappears, when you examine it, you will know that the self, the abiding substratum of the ego, is the definitive import of that word I. The Upadesha Undiyar verses 20 and 21 have been selected and placed here. Obviously, this is with reference to verses 20 and 21, especially verse 21. Bhagavan. In that state where the I subsides and awareness I will of itself arise. This is the reality that embraces all. Such is ever the true meaning of this word I. For even in the deepest sleep where the I is not, we do not cease to be. Ahaminasha baji, ahamaham daya spurati swayam paramapurna sat. Idam aham pada abhikyam anvaham. Ahami linake api alaya sat aya. That is the two verses in reference. When we normally say I, we refer to the body or the identity with the mind that we have. That when we in our the world of relationships that we have, whenever we say I did this, I did that, I listened, I went, I walked, we refer to the body, and the word body can include the physical or the sthula sharira, the subtle or the sukshma sharira, and the causal or karana sharira. Because the I do not know can also be a body. Many years ago, we used to be in Satsangha, in discussion group, where the I do not know could be used as a form which puts aside all other thought. All other thoughts that could be leveled or raised against I do not know, implying none of us know. I do not know could be used as a body, a thought which could displace the other thoughts. So the I do not know, if I do not know is taken as the Karana Sharira, which we cannot know. The causal body is so subtle that the ego cannot see it. It will raise as thoughts when we turn inward in enquiry. Otherwise, it remains in the subconscious. And it is that Karana Sharira which is supposed to push us into actions so far as we are not enquiring. Now, all the three Shariras are included in this I thought. That it includes the physical body, it includes the identities we carry, banker, husband, wife, good man, bad man, indifferent, very sincere, insincere. All these identities we have, they are included in the normal import of the I. The literal meaning of the I is the ego that limits itself to the body. And this is a strange phenomenon which the philosophers find it very difficult to put their finger on and explain how this happens. That this consciousness appears to have this ability to aggregate many things and become one, or disaggregate from that which it does not like and shrink. So it can either gather up many parts and become huge, or it can dismantle some of the parts and become small. How it does this, how it has this capacity, they are not able to find out, but it has that. And out of these two, the Jnana Margis say the ability to let go. The Bhakti Margis call the same thing as the ability to surrender. It dismantles the ego, it dismantles the contents of the consciousness. But when those contents are dismantled, as we saw in the previous verse, why it is to be dismantled? Because the ego appears and disappears. It appears in the waking state, where we seem to control many things, control many people, control many of the objects, and we are so happy about that control that and we have so many animals and lesser beings to looked down upon. So we feel high and mighty and safe. But in dream, the contents become uncontrollable. We don't know what we are going to dream. And in deep sleep, it goes off to sleep. Whether it is there or not there is a bone of contention, and in that lies the whole areas of Advaita, Visishta Advaita, and Advaita. Whether the ego continues in deep sleep or not, whether it continues after death or not, these are questions which are concerning that deep sleep area. But then, when we inquire into the truth of the I, because of its dual nature, it appears in waking state and dream, and it disappears in dream in deep sleep. Because it is so untenable, it is not reliable, it keeps changing. We inquire into the truth of that as Bhagavan instructs us, that all the mamakara arise after the ahankara, and the ahankara itself is so unreliable. So when the substrate is unreliable, how can the superstructure be proper? All the things you have built on that, they are all unreliable. They'll be dismantled. In fact, they all go away in deep sleep and seem to come back in waking. Of course, many of the sages say you can't carry any of that when you die. None of the things that you have gathered in the waking state you can carry at the time of death. Patinathar says the only things you can carry is the tapas you have done, whatever that may be. But then that's another story. But here Bhagavan doesn't ask us to rely on the carrying on after death. He asks us to find out what is the reality of the I now. Are we born now? Is there birth now? Only if there is birth now, there is going to be death, and after death question arises. So, are we born now? When we inquire into the truth of the I, the self, the abiding substratum of the ego, the self raises ahaminashabhaj ahamaham taya spurati hrit swayam paramapurna sat. The paramapurna sat, when the ego is dismantled, the structure of the universe is that there is the ego, there is the mamakara. All the mamakara superstructure is dependent on the ego, which itself is changing and unreliable. So we leave the mamakara and inquire into the truth of the ahankara, which when light is put on it becomes dismantled, and the aham taya, the spurana rises and shines. The difference between the earlier experience and the spurana is that in the earlier experience, the ahankara and the act of perceiving and the object of perception are three different things. The waking state, the dream, deep sleep, all come and go and are all perceived by the ahankara. Whereas in this Purana, this division is not there in consciousness. This Purana is akanda. That is why it's called as substrate. The changes. And the possessions are there, that gets dismantled. And when the aham in Ashabha, when the ego is dismantled, aham taya spurati hrit swayam. The heart, in the heart, this Purana rises and shines as I, as akanda. That is the real import of the I, says Bhagavan. What is the real import? And many times Surinagama writes, when Bhagavan would say I, did I not ask you to do this? Since he is abiding in that, he is referring to that I, he is referring to Ishvara, she writes. That whatever the Jnani does or says is from this Purana. So all actions are happening in that Purana. And when Bhagavan says, did I not tell you? And to one of the devotees, I think it is Sadhuam Swamigal, Bhagavan goes to the extent of saying, do first what I have told you. Do first what the substrate is telling you. So as we go towards the self, the Spurana itself becomes our guru. It guides us, it teaches us, it absorbs us. We become one with this Purana. When that identity with this Purana is there, then that is the reality. The Tripudi collapses. The seer seeing seen, the knower knowing known collapses. And only the Akanda Akara Aham Vritti is there. And Bhagavan says, hold that and keep quiet. Don't ask anything from that. Don't desire anything from this Purana. Don't say, let this person become like this. Then you come back to Triputi. You should understand the worth of what you are having. The Chintamani has come into your hands. Don't treat it lightly. Hold this Purana and keep quiet. Don't ask anything. It will remove your I am the body idea and it will absorb you into it. Or you can ask the question, who is experiencing this Purana? Continue the who am I inquiry? Who is experiencing this Purana? Then this Purana quietens down. Even the Purana quietens down. The Mauna, the self, is beyond even the Purana, says Bhagavan. And there the reality, whichever is, alone is. And that is the practice that Bhagavan gives. Dismantle the ego, inquire into the truth of the ego. The ever present I will rise and shine as the meaning. Hold it and keep quiet. Or inquire who is experiencing Spurana now. In either case, the Spurana will quieten and one will come to the real silence, the Atman. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in practice for the next 10 minutes. I think Ujjwalji can help us out this time. Now,
भगवते श्रीरमणाय।
Namo Ramana. I request Venkatesh ji to give us the summing up remarks. Namo Ramana, sir.
Namo Ramana. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo, Maheshwara, Gurur Sakshat, Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Dhyanamoolam Guror Murti, Pujamulam Guror Padam, Mantramulam Gurur Vakyam, Mokshamulam Gurur Kripa. Ramana. So we all believe ourselves to be human beings, right? And on top of this, what we call ourselves human beings, we individually have a name. So that's a first layer on top of this human being called a name. And then on top of that, we have a family name, another layer. On top of the family layer name, we have a city. We belong to this city. And on top of that, we have a state. And then you have the country. And then you have the continent. And then you have the earth. You can imagine, nowadays the football world football cup is going on, and you see initially at the knockout stages what they were looking at the different continents. Oh, these teams came from Asia, these teams came from Africa, these teams came from Europe, these teams came from America. That's what they were looking at. Now at the knockout stage, they're looking at the country, and now they're saying that Morocco, say, is in the last 16, and they say, okay, Morocco is from Africa. So the point really is that there are so many layers on this human being, and we have forgotten that we are a human being. Now imagine, like we do, who am I? If I go and ask somebody, hey, am I a human being? Imagine if I go on the road and just pat somebody on the back and say, am I a human being? He will say, I think so. You need treatment. You need medical treatment immediately because I think so. You've forgotten who you are. So this is I'm giving a parallel to this who am I. We have forgotten we are human beings. But imagine you go into a zoo. You go into a zoo, what will happen? All the animals will be in the cages, and if you were the tiger sitting in one of those cages, what you would see outside? You won't see any country, you would not see any, you will only see human beings. You will only see all those, and even we are who are on the other side of the cage. We at that point we don't say you are Australian, you are American, you're Japanese. We all look at ourselves as human beings. But why don't we stay with that beingness? See, it's called human being. That just you have to be being human. But why do we forget that? And we have all these layers on top. And these layers are all the problems that create all, like look at the war that is happening. Why is there war? Because they see there's one country and there's another country. Nobody sees that there is an underlying principle which is similar to all the beings, human beings. So they don't see that. Then they see only the country, they see the name, they see all the cities, and that's why you have all these wars. So Bhagwan is trying to tell us to come down to that lowest common denominator, that of being instead of doing. So it is not human doing, it is human being. So once we understand that, so the all the other things, that was the individual name, then the city, all these are all the factors of the ego. And, and unless you drop each one of them layer after layer, layer after layer, in different circumstances, you go into a jungle, and if it's all about animals, and you suddenly see a human being, oh, you think, oh, he's a human being. And at that point of time, you don't ask him which continent are you from or whatever it is, but you see only a human being. So important thing that we need to understand as devotees is how do we come to that lowest denominator, which is the human being in this particular example, wherein the other layers, the other outsides, we're able to drop it, just able to drop it. It's like beautiful example in the in the stadiums in Qatar. The Japanese, after the match, they go on, they pick up their garbage bags and pick up all the garbage which is there in the in the stadiums. Why do they do it? Because they don't see that they are in a different country. They think they are in this their own country, and they see the stadium as a holy place to be able to play matches, and it has to be clean. Cleanliness is next to godliness. They believe in that, and they clean it up. So why is it not there with all the humanity? Because you have not trained your mind. You're not trained our mind to be able to do that. So if we're able to drop the differences, if we're able to drop the gross and go into more subtle and subtle and subtle, then what happens? All these things drop away. And when we did self-inquiry, where was all, some people are in US, somebody people are maybe in Chennai, Bangalore, all over the place they are. But did it matter? It didn't matter. We were in the self. We were established in the self. We were established in the quietness. We were established in the silence within. That is what Bhagavan wants us to do. In that silence within, all these external factors that we see, which are illusion, Brahman Satyam, Jagat Mithya, all these things that we are thinking are actually there, they're just an illusion. There is nothing, there's no reality to that. But each one of us is real. Each one of us is a human being. That is very important to understand. And once we start understanding that we are a human being, then what happens that the common thread that grows across all human beings will be known. If that is known, then where are the differences? There are no differences. The layers on top of them vanish. If they vanish, then you are always with that I, which is the ego, will vanish. When that I went, then you are with that source. Aham ahamiti sakshat atma rupena bhati. You'll always be with that aham aham. You will be with that spurana. And finally, you have to transcend that also. You have to transcend this human being. You're being a human and say, I'm a human being. You have to transcend that also. Because your human being is also a thought. But it's a better thought than thinking of the other top layers. But when you come down to the self, when you come to the silence, you come to the adhara. For the whole universe to come to that silence, and that's where Bhagwan wants all of us to be. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana, sir. Namo Ramana Vaibhavji and Pratnama. Can we start the chanting?
Yes.
The rest of us can sit in inquiry as to who is listening.
नमो रमण भारद्वाज विश्वनाथ विरचितम् श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तर शतनामावलिः अपार सच्चित् सुखवारिराशे यस्योन्मात्रम् भुवनं समस्तम् गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरम् चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि ॐ महासेन महोंसेन जाताय नमः ॐ श्रीरमणाय नमः ॐ गुरवे नमः ॐ अखण्डसंविदाकाराय नमः ॐ महौजसे नमः ॐ कारणोद्भवाय नमः ॐ जगद्धितावताराय नमः ॐ श्रीभूमिनाथस्थलोत्थिताय नमः ॐ पराशरकुलोत्तंसाय नमः ॐ सुन्दरार्यतपःफलाय नमः। ॐ कमनीयसुचारित्राय नमः। ॐ सहायाम्बा सहायवते नमः। ॐ शोणाचलमहोलीनमानसाय नमः। ॐ स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमः। ॐ श्रीमद्वादशान्तमहास्थलब्धविद्योदयाय नमः। ॐ महाशक्तिनिपातेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः। ॐ परमार्थविदे नमः। ॐ तीव्राय नमः। ॐ पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः। ॐ इन्दुमौलिना पितृमते नमः। ॐ पितुरादेशतः शोणशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः। ॐ तपोमयाय नमः। ॐ उदासीनाय नमः। ॐ महायोगिने नमः। ॐ महोत्साहाय नमः। ॐ कुशाग्रधिये नमः। ॐ शान्तसङ्कल्पसंरम्भाय नमः। ॐ सुसन्दृशे नमः। ॐ सवित्रे नमः। ॐ स्थिराय नमः। ॐ तपक्षपितसर्वाङ्गाय नमः। ॐ फुल्लाम्बुजविलोचनाय नमः। ॐ चन्द्रिकासितहासश्रीमण्डिताननमण्डलाय नमः। ॐ चूतवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः। ॐ चूर्णिताखिलविभ्रमाय नमः। ॐ वेदवेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञाय नमः। ॐ चिन्मुद्रिणे नमः। ॐ त्रिगुणातिकाय नमः। ॐ विरूपाक्षगुहावासाय नमः। ॐ विराजदशलाकृतये नमः। ॐ उद्दीप्तनयनाय नमः। ॐ पूर्णाय नमः। ॐ रचिताचलताण्डवाय नमः। ॐ गम्भीराय नमः। ॐ परमाचार्याय नमः। ॐ सुप्रसन्नाय नमः। ॐ अभयप्रदाय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणास्यनिभाय नमः। ॐ धीराय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः। ॐ स्वराजे नमः। ॐ महर्षये नमः। ॐ भगवते नमः। ॐ ईड्याय नमः। ॐ भूमविद्याविशारदाय नमः। ॐ विमलाय नमः। ॐ दीर्घदर्शिने नमः। ॐ आप्ताय नमः। ॐ ऋजुमार्गप्रदर्शकाय नमः। ॐ समदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्यदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्याय नमः। ॐ प्रशान्ताय नमः। ॐ अमितविक्रमाय नमः। ॐ सुकुमाराय नमः। ॐ सदानन्दाय नमः। ॐ मृदुभाषिणे नमः। ॐ दयार्णवाय नमः। ॐ श्रीशोणाचलनिर्भोतस्कन्दाश्रमनिकेतनाय नमः। ॐ सद्दर्शनोपदेश्ये नमः। ॐ सद्भक्तवृन्दपरिवृताय नमः। ॐ गणेशमुनिभृङ्गेन सेविताङ्घ्रिसरोरुहाय नमः। ॐ गीतोपदेशसारादिग्रन्थसञ्चिन्नसंशयाय नमः। ॐ वर्णाश्रममतातीताय नमः। ॐ रसज्ञाय नमः। ॐ सौम्याय नमः। ॐ आत्मवते नमः। ॐ सर्वावनिमतस्थानाम् आराध्याय नमः। ॐ सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः। ॐ आत्मारामाय नमः। ॐ महाभागाय नमः। ॐ मातृमुक्तिविधायकाय नमः। ॐ विनताय नमः। ॐ विनुताय नमः। ॐ विप्राय नमः। ॐ मुनीन्द्राय नमः। ॐ पावकोज्ज्वलाय नमः। ॐ दर्शनादगसंहारिणे नमः। ॐ मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः। ॐ ऋक्षान्तिकरसान्निध्याय नमः। ॐ स्मरणात् बन्धमोचकाय नमः। ॐ अन्तस्तिमिरचण्डांशवे नमः। ॐ संसारार्णवतारकाय नमः। ॐ शोणादृशस्तुतिद्रष्टे नमः। ॐ हार्दविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः। ॐ अविच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः। ॐ नैसर्गिकमहातपसे नमः। ॐ कमण्डलुदयाय नमः। ॐ शूद्रकौपीनवसनाय नमः। ॐ गुहाय नमः। ॐ दण्डपाणये नमः। ॐ कृपापूर्णाय नमः। ॐ भवरोगविषग्वराय नमः। ॐ स्कन्दाय नमः। ॐ देवतमाय नमः। ॐ अमर्त्याय नमः। ॐ सेनान्ये नमः। ॐ पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ॐ श्रीरमण भगवते नमः। श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तरशतनाम पूजां समर्पयामि। यस्थानूररुणाचलस्य पदयोः स्मृत्याजनिं प्राप्यत दिव्यानुग्रहसुप्रवाहविवश सादात्म्यभावङ्गतः नित्यतपसा लोकान् पुनासेकरान् तस्मै श्रीरमणाय ते नम इदं लोकोत्तरज्योतिषे। ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय।
Namo Ramana to all.